We'll start the webinar momentarily.
Hello, my name is Kathleen Massey, and I'm the new president of the Groningen Declaration Network, and I'd like to welcome you to the GDN's new webinar series. I'm so pleased that you have decided to participate in the GDN by attending today's webinar. Your involvement is critical to the success of the network. The GDN is a global organization that brings together people and organizations who are committed to making it possible and easy for people worldwide to consult and share their authentic educational data with whomever they want, whenever they want, wherever they are. Today, you are joining thought leaders from across the world to pave the way for this to be done well, equitably, and by developing trusted networks and using contemporary secure technology. I invite you to continue your involvement in the GDN by attending additional webinars and by joining us at our next annual meeting in Ottawa, Canada in May 2021. I hope you find this live webinar both informative and engaging, and I thank you again for joining.
And good evening from Singapore, and welcome to you all from wherever you're joining us for the 8th webinar in the Groningen Declaration Network's 2020 annual meeting series. I'd like to thank Herman de Leeuw and the team at the GDN for inviting me to moderate this session, in which we'll focus on Asian perspectives of credential mobility. Asia is very much a new frontier for digital credentials, and our expert panelists from China, Japan, and Singapore will give you a comprehensive insight into their work in this dynamic region. My name is Darren Mcdermott. I'm originally from Dublin, Ireland, and now based in Singapore, having lived in various parts of East Asia for much of the last 20 years. I've been involved in the internationalization of education for most of my career, and I'm currently team leader designate for the European Union funded support to higher education in the ASEAN region, otherwise known as the SHARE program, with ASEAN standing for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So the SHARE program's objective is to support the creation of ASEAN higher education area with an Erasmus-like scholarship scheme, supported by robust regional quality assurance, qualifications recognition, and credential mobility frameworks. I'm pleased to say the program has recently been extended for another 2 years. So before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to draw your attention to the recently published OECD Education at a Glance report, which states that pre-COVID, students from Asia form the largest group of international students in tertiary education at all levels, accounting for 57% of all mobile students across the OECD in 2018. And while the majority of Asian international students pursue their studies outside of Asia, there is an increasing growth of intra-Asia student mobility. As with the SHARE program and other initiatives, including China, Japan, and Korea, we're seeing a concerted development of intra-regional education area work to complement that of the European higher education area. And this is evidenced by the Asia-Pacific Regional Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications in Higher Education, or the Tokyo Convention. So while mobility has been disrupted, negatively, in this case by COVID-19, it provides an opportunity to look at ways of developing more equitable and inclusive approaches to the internationalization of education, of which digital transformation of credential recognition is a very important dimension. So I'm pleased to be joined by a panel of experts from across Asia for this session. From China, Dr. Chun Wei-Sing, Director of the Information Division of the China Higher Education Student Information and Career Center, or CHESIC, and Mr. Chen Wen-jin, or Edward as he wishes to be addressed, who's the Project Manager at CHESIC. From Japan, Mr. Koichi Nakasaki, Chief Research Officer of the Institute for Future Engineering Japan, and Director of Research Consortium for Sustainable International Education, or REXI. And from Singapore, Mr. Zhengwei Kwa, co-founder and CEO of Credential. So please address any questions to the panelists in the course of their presentations in the chat box. And I'd like to move to our first destination on this whistle-stop tour of credential mobility initiatives across Asia. And that's at the China Higher Education Student Information and Career Center in Beijing. And if I can introduce the speakers, Dr. Chung Wei Sing, Director of the Information Division, graduated from Beihang University in 2007 with a doctorate degree in computer application technology. The same year, he joined the Information Division at CHESIC, where he primarily works on the digitalization of China higher education student records, qualifications management, postgraduate recruitment management, and Gaokao recruitment information management. The Gaokao is China's national college entrance examination, which upwards of 7 million students sit each year. So Dr. Chung is also responsible for the construction and operation of the China Postgraduate Recruitment Information website and China's Ministry of Education Sunshine Gaokao program. Dr. Chung is joined by Mr. Chen Wenjin, or Edward. Edward is a project manager in the International Promotion Department of CHESIC, where he's responsible for international collaboration, business development, partnership, and stakeholder relations. Dr. Chung will say a few words in Chinese, which Edward will translate for us, and then proceed to present CHESIC's experience of Chinese student information management over the last 2 decades. So very welcome, Dr. Chung, and Edward, over to you.
So thank you, Darren and Melanie. Good evening and good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to meet you via GDN 2020 Animating Webinar. And Chen Wenjun, you can call me Edward. I'm the project manager of CHESIC, as Dr. Chen Wenjun is now studying in a training course. He's unable to join us today. So I will present on behalf of him. Hope you'll find today's presentation informative and helpful. So these are the content I will be covering today. The first part, in order to crack down diploma forging, MOE began to implement the e-registration of higher education qualification certificate, HEQC, in 2001. In the same year, MOE opens core system for HEQC, and also traced back and registered HEQC from 1991 to 2000 into the database. In 2002, MOE authorized CHESIC to provide verification service of HEQC, and then 2 years later, CHSI was designated as the website for HEQC checking. So far, we have built up a mature system of online query and verification. Our services include verification for college student records, HEQC, college transcript, Gaokao scores, Huikao results, and high school diploma. With the growth of Chinese students studying abroad and qualification recognition across borders, we strengthened the collaboration and built up constant communications with organizations and institutions across the globe. Besides, we have set up 36 agencies around the world, 33 in China, 1 in Japan, 1 in South Korea, and 1 in Australia. In 2004, to regulate disorderly college admission, the MOE implemented freshman list check. And in 2007, to regulate above plan college admission, the MOE implemented e-registration of college freshman student record. And later on, adult education and online education e-registration was also implemented. In 2008, to further regulate college admission, the MOE implemented yearly registration of student record. Therefore, the system of student information management covers the whole process from enrollment to graduation. Now, CHESIC has already developed a student information database integrating college enrollment, college student record and HEQC, graduate employment, and student financial aid information. Based on the huge database and integrated systems, CHESIC carries out a series of student information and consultation surveys. The platforms which we operate are CHSI, Graduate Admission Platform, Shanshai Gaokao, NCSS, Conscription Platform, and so on. And these platforms are online. For college enrollment, we have Sunshine Gaokao platform, which authorities will publish admission policies and regulations. The accredited institution list was also shared here, and the functions of it involves college information posting, satisfaction rate survey, the searching of institutions and majors, the recommendation of majors and programs, and also support advisory week for Gaokao. The Graduate Admission Platform is the designated national platform for graduate education admission, and it's also the platform for online and supplementary application, institution advertising and consultation, and it's also an e-government platform.
Edward, I'm very sorry to interrupt. I think you have slides to go with this. So would it be possible for you to share those on the screen?
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Perfect. And we'll just make that full screen. Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks very
So
much.
can you see the slides?
Yeah, perfectly. Carry on.
Great. So next part is the student record and qualification management platform. This was opened in 2006, and it includes student record and HEQC registration, official document sending and receiving. It covers all institutions ranging from undergraduate and graduate education, adult, online, and soft adult education nationwide. In 2014, a complete system of e-registration of student record and HEQC was officially set up. By June 2020, there are 1.65 billion records in our database, of which 206 million qualification records was registered. For employment and entrepreneurship service, we have two websites and one system. The National Career Service site for students, NCSS, is mainly provides job posting and online job fair. The National Graduate Employment Information Student Entrepreneurship Service website mainly provides information on national innovation and entrepreneurship competition and career training as well. CHESIC also provides statistical analysis for government decision-making via the National Graduate Employment Management System. Integrated system plays a good role in serving the society. Owing to the COVID-19, a large number of face-to-face work cannot be carried out. CHESIC developed a new system based on our existing systems. We support online recruitment and interview for employment, online interview for admission, online artwork submission and interview for exams, and online application and check for verification. These systems help to keep the social distance, reduce infection risk, ensure the equity and quality of admission, and improve the efficiency. To promote e-government systems interconnection and public data sharing, the MOE published 9 service APIs, include HEQC, the queries for student record, degree, and basic education student record and in-school status, secondary vocational in-school status, the overseas qualifications, and teachers' qualification as well. The three interfaces we maintained are the HE, the higher education student record, and HEQC and HEQC verification. These interfaces are successfully debugged in January 2018, and thanks to the simplified approval process, by August this year, 24 provinces and 9 ministries opened the CHESIC API for qualification and student record query. Its benefit for talent introduction, precision, poverty alleviation, disabled student support, employment and entrepreneurship, professional qualification exams, and qualification verification, etc. In the future, we will continue to strengthen information security, protect citizens' privacy, and improve management systems. Also keep systems and mechanisms innovative and improve related standards. Thank you much for your attention. That's all for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Edward. It was a very interesting presentation of CHESIC's experiences and recent developments. You mentioned to minimize the impact of COVID-19, CHESIC has developed systems for online exams and interviews. Has this increased the possibility of people cheating, or and how have you counteracted this?
Yes, this is a challenge that I think every online provider tools are facing. That's the information systems we developed collects dynamic pictures in real time for anti-cheating monitoring, and candidates are required to arrange dual cameras to prevent cheating.
Okay, and how has that worked out so far?
Yeah, it works very well, and we think with this system, the cost of cheating has been raised greatly. So we won't see, we don't see a lot of cases for cheating.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thanks very much. I'll come back to you shortly for questions from the attendees, and just a reminder, if you have any questions for Edward, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'd like now to move to Tokyo to learn more about a very new initiative in the digital credential space in Japan. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Koichi Nakasaki, an information technology business professional and Chief Research Officer of the Institute for Future Engineering, Japan. Koichi was previously Head of Business Development and Product Strategy at Thomson Reuters, Japan, and recently joined as a director of the Research Consortium for Sustainable International Education, or REXI, which is also a GDN signatory. And the other REXI directors are, and I believe joining us on the call today, is Professor Shingo Ashizawa of Toyo University, Professor Hiroshi Ota of Hitotsubashi University, also in Tokyo, and Mr. Katsumi Shiraishi, Director General of the Asian Students Cultural Association. So this team of highly experienced international education experts are launching Japan's first national network of academic credentials for student data mobility. And Koichi's presentation will cover insights as to why this is a nascent development in Japan, how the REXI team have addressed barriers to digital credential adoption, particular to Japan, and the future of the REXI initiative. So welcome, Koichi, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Darren. So Japan is so much behind from China. We are just launching a national network digital credential for Japan. The pilot launch was 2nd September, just last month, and the nationwide rollout will follow. This is really last OECD country who digitized credential, actually out of 40 OECD countries. this is quite a different situation from the rest of other countries in the world, actually. For example, Canada, they are launching the national network this year, around the same time as Japan, but before the national network, there have been quite a few Canadian universities who were issuing certificate in digital forms. However, in Japan, as of March 2020, as far as our research found, there was no single higher education institution who was issuing any credential in any digital major. So at the end of last year, four of us, our team, connected and shared the concern that we should not leave the legacy situation any further, and agree that it should be us who stand up and change the situation. Shingo, Hiroshi, and Katsumi have been the leader in the international education in Japanese higher education community for a long time. I recently joined the team from IT business world, and four of us team up early this year. So that team, we started up with domestic international survey end of last year, and that is completed in April. And then we have gone through the platform selection process based on the survey result. At the same time, we have also engaged the university to share our concerns, and we have been growing our friends network from 4 people to like 100 people. And with this networking, bottom-up networking, we have launched pilot program with 5 pilot participants in university last month. Through the platform selection process, we have selected digitally GDN member as a partner for Japan. The organization structure for the network is a science research project headed by Shingo, is supervising the pilot program. RECSI GDN member is a central governance body and will continue to be the central governance body post-pilot nationwide rollout. A little bit share our insight. What was the challenge for the initiative and why Japan was so behind? From our survey conducted early this year, we have found that there was a significant perception gap between supply side of higher education sector and demand side of Japanese corporate. Deployment level of digital credential, the survey result was zero digitalization in higher education sector. 16.5% of corporate already accepting university issued certificate in digital form from overseas graduates and some others. Needs recognition, and the survey result was only 11.3% higher education institution recognized as the digitalization is needed for credential. 90% of corporate recognize as the digitalization is desired. Readiness to issue or accept certificate in digital form, only 1.3% higher education institution are just considering. But 90% of corporate are ready to accept immediately or short reading time. Where the gap comes from, demand side of corporate are under high pressure of internationalizing because of 30 years sluggish economy. Growth opportunity was outside Japan. Declining birth rate, which demand international talent acquisition, and the international investors are also pressurizing corporate for SDG or paperless. On the other hand, higher education institutions do not recognize such pressure, but instead there was a legacy perception that the digital credential means a government leading huge domestic central system development. So our challenge was basically to fill in with a gap between supply side and demand side. In order to do that, what we have done is basically thought leadership to change the mindset of higher education community. Firstly, that is internationalization of the mindset. We've been telling university stakeholders, let's move out of the domestically closed technology and move to the internationally used transparent technology and internationally connected network, and also move the credential under higher education institution governance, so that we can commit to the Tokyo Convention's transparency and fairness and the reasonable time frame, that kind of things, as well as shared objective to and collaborate with GDN members. We are also deliver the message to decentralization, and that means let's not wait for the government is moving, and also we move on voluntary basis from the bottom up. We have also brought up a sense of market to the credential by stimulating a competition. For the technical architecture, we go with a distributed architecture instead of a centralized one. And also the law, AAPI is a Japanese version of GDPR, is also a key driver or key education to move to the decentralized architecture, as the law principally bans transfer of personal data. And the other thought leadership message is future orientation. COVID-19 is accelerating the transformation of higher education to lifelong learning and Internet of Education, IOE, where much higher student data portability is required. That is happening in Japan as well as like the rest of other countries, like China. So we capitalize on the trend for rapidly transforming to the digital credential in Japan. So that's basically what we have done and we are doing for Japan. Thank you.
Great. Many thanks, Koichi. That's a significant task ahead, but I'm sure the team you've assembled is more than equal to the task. Can you tell me a little bit more about the partner selection process for the Digital Credentials project?
Yeah. So we didn't put public tender. It's very bottom-up exercise. With talking with international. We approach to around 10 international and domestic vendors, platform vendors. And then we also set the criteria of selection of the platform. So that is an international network and proven platform and GDPR compliant and those criteria. Sure. And then digitally is spark for those criteria.
Okay, great. I'm sure Digitary will be familiar to most GDM members, as certainly as the platinum sponsor of this series. Okay, thanks very much, Koichi. I'll come back to you shortly with some questions. I see there's a question there for you already in the Q&A. And we'll move to Singapore and another relatively new but high impact entity contributing to the development of digital credentials in Asia. Allow me to introduce Mr. Zhengwei Kwa, the co-founder and CEO of Credential, which is a private company providing a turnkey certification solution for education institutes. Credential are working on a nationwide initiative to put Singaporean education credentials on the blockchain. And Zhengwei is also a permanent guest lecturer at Singapore Management University with a focus on blockchain and the Internet of Things. So over to you, Zhengwei.
Thanks, Darren, and the GDN for the opportunity. Today's title is How Singapore Puts an Entire Nation's Credentials onto the Blockchain. But I won't go too much into the technical side. So if you wish to know more, feel free to reach out to me after the call. Okay, so a little bit of background. The project actually started before 2019. One of the government agency called GovTech Singapore, which is the technology arm of Singapore, worked with one of the local polytechnics to start to digitize their diploma issuance system. The pilot was an extreme success. And then what they did was to bring all the different tertiary education network in, and they signed a really good MOU in May 2019, which is about the same time when Quantify started as well. And then since then, for the past about coming to 18 months, is helping the schools one by one to start to transform from physical, from PDF to these verifiable documents that is secured by the blockchain. So that's the background. The next two slides go a little bit into the technology, but it looks at it from a very high level, so it won't be too technical, don't worry. At the base of it all, we use the blockchain called Ethereum. And on top of that, we have the schema, which is called Open Cert or Open Attestation. So there are different schemas around the world, and I'm sure most of the attendees are familiar, like W3C, like Block Cert. There's just many of them. And then on top of that schema layer is where Credential sits as the application layer. So to put it really simply, right, Open Cert, W3C, if they are the internet, which is the TCP/IP, Credential is the Google Chrome or the Mozilla Firefox, right? We simply make it so easy to access these kind of schemas. And in our opinion, our role here is to be schema agnostic, to be blockchain agnostic. So we can anytime plug and play any different system into ours. And as I said, we are the browser, and education institutes will be the users. This slightly technical. So what we do, we take the data from the school, and fundamentally the certificate itself is in a JSON format. So for those who are not familiar, JSON is a set of key value pair. Key meaning a name, then the value meaning Zhengwei, or key meaning my ID, and the value will be my national ID. So with these key value pairs, that includes all the details from your diploma, your transcript, your degree, whatever it is, we will do a triple layer hashing. Hashing is the process of changing data into a string of alphanumerical. And this hashing process allows us to derive a fingerprint of the document, right? Just like you and I, we have fingerprints. That fingerprint is the thing that we anchor onto the blockchain. So here, there's a few concepts that's very important. Firstly, private data still stay with you. None of your private data will be up on the blockchain, which is a public network. Secondly, nobody can read anything from your fingerprints. So what happened next if I pass that certificate, let's say to Darren? Darren can then, using a neutral party or the open source library, to regenerate that fingerprint and compare to the blockchain. fundamentally, the blockchain is tamper-proof, right? If we go into why is tamper-proof, is another hour session. So let's take it as face value, right? It's tamper-proof. And then given that the fingerprint matches, I can then rely on the contents of the certificate that I pass to Darren. As simple as that. Of course, when it comes to large-scale implementation, which I think Koichi will understand very soon, there's going to be lots of challenges involved. We just selected 3 that we thought is usually common across all. The first being the fact that we chose to use blockchain was double-edged sword. It works fantastic from a technical point of view, from a security point of view, from a cost point of view, from a time to market point of view. But it was really difficult to educate the market, right? There was a lack of understanding on the technical side, and there's also a huge negative media attention to it. If you start talking about blockchain, half of the people will, tune off. And then you're talking about the education industry, which traditionally tends towards the late adopter side. So education was one of the biggest problems that we faced over the last 18 months. And then technical implementation. So when the schools first started, using the open, I show you the layers, right? The Ethereum blockchain, the open source schema, and the schools, they tried to implement this on their own. If I were to give you an example to that, right, it is as if you are trying to access the internet without a browser. Yeah. So today, of course, you and I can access the internet through our command line item, right? But it's almost impossible to do that. So that's where the browser, so-called Quantify comes in. And then lastly, the very, very important thing for adoption is actually scalability. So the value of the entire network really, really comes and increase with scale. So the first few adopter would not see the value as much as the later adopter. So on a very early onset, we have to convince the early, schools to say, hey, trust us, we are going to build an entire ecosystem out of this. Join us, and you can see the value in the future. So this 3 was really painful. But then we started to look at it and see how we can change it. Especially, Credify is a private entity, so there's always very little that we can do. We don't really have the kind of government mandates that we can push on. We don't have the kind of influence. And then on top of it, right, we were just a small startup back then. So what we did is in parallel to what we did and the problem we saved. In the education on blockchain, we decided to focus on the objective and value instead of the technology. So when we went to client meeting, partners meeting, investor meeting, whatever it is, we put blockchain at backseat. We don't talk about it, right? We focus on the value. If you want to know more, you can ask me. Otherwise, I'm not going to talk about it. It worked perfectly. So we don't like, people who say we are a blockchain company that does certification. That's not true. So we are a certification, and we just happen to use blockchain. We can use any other technology that's fitting for what we do in the future as well. The second part on technical implementation is where we design an entire system for the schools to use, where it's zero tech. That is to say, the users can just come on board with almost no learning curve. From day 0, they can just start using our system. It's a pure cloud-based solution that also comes with a suite of API. And then the last one, which is something that I thought was especially important, because a lot of issues in the credential sharing industry, as well as the international mobility of students nowadays, is because solutions are not inclusive. Most of the solutions out there are expensive. They are limited to usually the consortium of big universities that are involved. If you implement something for the top 5 universities and eventually you want to get a nationwide adoption, but are you going to concentrate only on your higher education? Can the small school next door down the road also participate in this? Because if they can't, then your system is not inclusive and the ecosystem cannot benefit from all the different kind of credentials involved. So let's say I come as a candidate profiling and only my university degree is getting recognized, but not my, 3-day short course or my 5-day Python course, then I don't have a holistic profile over there. So we decided to build a very inclusive solution that's easy to set up, low cost, and fundamentally decentralized. So far in the last 18 months, we are currently in 5 different countries. So on top of Singapore, we are in Yangon, Tokyo, Kuala Lumpur, as well as Ho Chi Minh. More than 20 organizations, and below the organizations are more than 50 different schools. We have top universities in Asia, we have training institutes, we have government agencies, 300,000 documents issued by now, and more than 1 million verifications done. On top of that, we also had some cross-border collaboration with the Netherlands. That's why the GDN network is especially close to heart for us. We're currently in a pilot phase with TU Delft. Basically, we scope it out really, really small to see how we can have exchange students, right? Short 3 to 4 months exchange students, when they come back from Netherlands to Singapore or Singapore to Netherlands, how can we transfer the credits as well as the credentials back from the host to the home university in the fastest way with no man in the middle. So very, very clear objective for us. Reduce the time taken, reduce the human involved. It's going pretty well. I'll keep you guys updated as we go. And for the next time, the future for us is definitely Southeast Asia. We see a huge need over here where credentials coming out of Southeast Asia requires a lot of recognition. And we intend to help the citizens there to get higher quality education, be it in the US, be it in Japan, be it in Europe, by having their credentials recognized by the other countries. So that's us. And then thank you to the sponsors. And that's all for me today. Darren, if you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Cheng Wei. That's excellent. I suppose Southeast Asia is close to my heart as well, and well, I suppose where I've based myself for much of the last few years. So I'm really interested in what are some of the obstacles and opportunities you envisage in rolling out across Southeast Asia?
I think the Southeast Asian side, one of the difficulty that I expect is the lack of the foundational tech resources. So schools may not even have that basic digital infrastructure where we can tap on. For us to turn something digital into verifiable digital is very simple. But for us to turn a fully paper-based system into a verifiable digital is a good frog leap. But then I expect to see a lot of inertia over there and obstacle. In terms of opportunity, I think some of the key collaborations and key events that are happening, such as the SHARE program that you mentioned, right? The Erasmus support and the EU support can have like I will call it like a village chief, right? So SHARE is there as an anchor to all the different countries, and using SHARE as a medium, we can actually reach out to more Southeast Asian schools, I believe.
Okay, thanks very much. We're looking forward to SHARE resuming its work with the various stakeholders and partners in Southeast Asia. So yeah, look forward to having you involved in various discussions then as well. Okay, at this point now, I'd like to go to some of the questions from the attendees, and we're very lucky that we have some very good ones. As a general question, I think we have an interesting one here from, yes. So from Simone Ravioli from Digitary, and I suppose we can address this to all panelists, given that you're all in the same region, you're all in Asia Pacific. What kind of collaboration can you imagine from different stakeholders in Asia Pacific, universities, vendors, UNESCO, to turn the implementation of the Tokyo Recognition Convention into a reference for other regional conventions in leveraging digital channels? So what are the collaboration opportunities afforded to us by the Tokyo Convention? So I'll throw that open if any of the panelists would like to weigh in on that.
We have IEEE Internet Education Board, where I'm representing Japan and UNESCO and all the Asian countries all over the world. We gather once a month and then expanding the scalability and connectivity and digital portability of recognition kind of things to Tokyo Convention.
Sure.
That is one community to expand the collaboration.
Yeah, very much so. And going back to Zheng Wei's idea of the village chief, so a galvanizing mechanism for various disparate organizations to gather around and co-create solutions that are more interconnected. Edward, did you have anything that you'd like to say on that? Do you see yourself working more closely with your Asian counterparts?
Yes, I think the Tokyo Convention plays a very good role to not only accelerate the international collaboration, but also the domestic collaboration. Take China as an example. We have not established a unified national information center for credentials and qualification recognition and verification at the moment, but because we ratified the Tokyo Convention and accelerate the process, that we are planning to take a joint effort of CHESIC, CDGDC, and CSSE to jointly establish a national information center for qualification recognition. And it will benefit not only the domestic users to a unified interface and APIs and make things faster and simple, but also provide more informations in English for other national information centers, stakeholders, institutions as well. Thank you.
Great. Zheng Wei?
I don't have much more to add on.
Okay. Well, you did make that very good point about the village chief. So yeah, perhaps I can put another question. A great question from Kathleen Massey. Thanking you all for your presentations and how informative they were. Kathleen points to Zheng Wei's point on inclusive solutions being very compelling. She's interested to know what's being done in Japan and China to achieve equitable access for smaller institutions and to serve people in remote communities. So I suppose another question for Edward and Koichi. What is being done to achieve equitable access for smaller institutions and serve people in remote communities? Edward, I see that you're speaking there. Are you okay to answer that?
So yes, it's a challenge, but I think thanks to the regulations from the national side, the ministries implements the electronic registration for the institutions in higher education of their student information compulsorily. So that is the policies that make us institutions to have the obligation to help those institutions have no one left behind, to help them and ask help from their local authorities and government to make them all to the same level. That's how we can make all the data and student data into our national database 100%. That's not only the initial intention of this system was for diploma forging, fighting against that, but it also benefits those remote in the institutions in remote areas and smaller institutions to have the faster process of digitalization.
Great, fantastic. So
Yes.
carry on, please.
And also to cope the COVID-19, we have the remote online interview tools for those institutions that they can have their second round interview and application of graduate schools smoothly.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. That's really interesting. Koichi, did you have a point on that, or?
No, just the same as Edo was same as China, but just Japan is so behind, 20 years
Okay.
behind from China.
Great. I have another question for you, Koichi. This is from Herman. He'd like you to expand a little bit on the new Japanese NIC, so HIAD-QA, and how that's involved in your pilot, and how recognition issues will be dealt with, if at all, during your pilot.
Oh, okay, so it's not HIAD, it's the NIAD, NIAD.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
I misread that, forgive me.
No. They have commissioned the research, the supply side research of higher education, Brexit commissioned demand side. Also for part of the international research for searching platform partners, NIAD also commissioned that part as well.
Okay, great. So they'll be heavily involved. Thanks very much. Another question from Herman for you, Janeway. Herman says, it looks like the system now deployed in Singapore centers on tertiary education results. Is there going to be a move towards covering more results outside of tertiary education, so primary or secondary, or skills acquired in the workplace? So, will there be a movement towards lifelong learning in the future?
So I'll share what we have done and what we will do. So surprisingly, almost half of the documents that I mentioned just now is in post-tertiary courses. So there's the lifelong learning, the adult education, the professionals, they are continually improving themselves. So around 100,000 of them comes from there. So it's not all the tertiary yet. And then what we will do though is the pre-tertiary education going forward. Yeah, so it's kind of like a step by step, but they are definitely in the pipeline. And then you can start seeing the person, an entire credential from the day that he was in primary, secondary school to his university degree. And then on top of that, as he's working and improving himself, those things are added on as well. Right? That's an entire suite of your skills and competency from an academic point of view. But the next step that we will do, haven't done yet, is also to quantify the credentials of work experience. So for example, the Singapore government SkillsFuture government agency SkillsFuture has a framework of the different skill and competencies. So what we're doing now, we are trying it out with our own interns and our own people that come from our own company, where we issue them a certificate of employment, and then we start to plug in all the skills and competencies based on the framework that the government has set, so that they know this intern having completed this internship, what were the skills and to which level has he attained that. But all these are still a little bit experimental, I would say, but very exciting.
I suppose it raises a question then of how key support from the government is for various initiatives, and I suppose where the direction comes from. Does it come from the institutions, the entities, or government departments? So I'd be interested in having your thoughts on that.
regarding the collaboration.
Yeah, and support from government.
So I think a lot of this stuff is private and public collaboration. And I think this will continue being the case, especially with the onset of COVID.
Sure.
Where a lot of initiative from a good to have has become a need to have. So we see that not just in the education industry, but also in the healthcare industry, which we have a pretty strong presence in as well. That I think in the next 2 to 5 years, a lot of new initiative will be a public-private collaboration.
Sure.
That's what I think.
Okay. Koichi, if I can come back to you, and there's a question from Amy Schroff. Why is Japan not looking at a central depository model?
Because Japanese universities are so diverse. Also, student information system is so diverse and fragmented. We just don't think it's a North European or Chinese model of central depository is realistic for Japan. So we go to the decentralized bottom-up approach.
Okay, right. Yeah, I think there's a number of different options on the table, but certainly the autonomy and independence of Japanese institutions is a difficult thing. Kathleen has a question on what are your plans for assessing the perceptions and experiences of end users of the digital credential sharing services and systems? So maybe I'll put that to you, Edward. Or do you assess the perceptions and experiences of end users on digital credentials?
Pardon, can you repeat the question?
So the question again is, what are your plans for assessing the perceptions and experiences of end users of digital credential sharing services? So do you do evaluation of the end users' experiences?
So far we are the digital documents issuing authorities. So we are more verification agency than an evaluator receiving different kinds of credentials.
Sure.
Yes,
Okay.
so we do not have much experience in that kind of aspect. Probably the CSSC have better answers because they are receiving the overseas credentials and evaluate to put equivalence in compare with the Chinese scheme.
Okay, that's a good point. Would anyone else like to address that?
No, we don't have user.
Okay, still early days for you, Koichi, I know. Zhengwei?
Okay, weighing a little bit. I don't think we have plans to access that per se, but what we have done since day one is to make it as easy to use as possible. So the digital certs that we issued, we don't have the need to, for the end user to log in or to connect directly to the school or to contact the school whatsoever. It's a simple drag and drop onto the issuer's website. So today, if you receive a cert from one of our school that uses us, you can just take the cert, go to the school's website, drag and drop, and it comes out verified with the cert. And in addition to that, we started adding even more elements to it. For example, that process can be shortened into a single URL.
Sure.
So clicking on that URL will allow you to go to the school website again with the cert already rendered. You don't even need the actual document. So give you an example. Imagine a dynamic PDF as your resume, right? So for example, Zhengwei, I went to NUS. Before that, I was in National Junior College. I work at this company. Each of these credentials comes with a hyperlink. So from a HR perspective, I'm taking that PDF. I click, I go to the website, good. I click, I go to the website, good. So that's the second thing that we've done, making it super easy. And then the third one is to open up our API for candidate profiling portals like, let's say LinkedIn. So when I do my profiling on LinkedIn, if LinkedIn has my API, what they can do is that the candidate can drag and drop the file Firstly, the content is extracted and populated, so I can't change anything. If I get a 4.5 GPA, I can change it to 4.5 and put it on my LinkedIn and hope that nobody checks. And then it comes with a verified tick as well. So imagine going to someone's LinkedIn profile with everything having the blue tick, blue tick, blue tick, blue tick. So as a whole, I think there's a lot of parties that need to come together, but I'm excited for what's to come.
Certainly, and it's an interesting space, and we'll watch this space. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of the developments across this over the years to come. I'd like to thank our panelists for their valuable contributions to this session and the attendees for their great questions. Thank you again, once again, to the teams at the GDN and ACRAO for organizing this webinar series. And I'd like to draw your attention to the next session, GDN webinar 9 on October 21st on the topic of micro-credentials in the digital credential ecosystem. The session will be moderated by Mr. Michael Hurig, head of the Strategic Planning Division at the AAPI, or the German Academic Exchange Service. And he'll be joined by Barbara Dale-Jones, founding partner and director of the Field Institute, South Africa, Beverly Oliver, Emeritus Professor and Principal Consultant at EduBrief, Australia, and Simone Ravaioli, Director of Strategic Partnerships, Digitary, Ireland and Australia. So once again, I realize we've run over time slightly. Thank you to all the participants of this session. I really enjoyed it and looking forward to seeing what comes next. Thank you all.
Thank you.